FOG number 175 is Chris McQueen. Chris played 5 Origin games for Queensland after making his debut in 2013, playing in all 3 matches of the 8th consecutive series win. Chris was born in Brisbane but grew up in Kingaroy, playing his junior football with the Kingaroy Red Ants. In 2006, Chris headed to Brisbane and joined Wynnum Manly. In 2009, he joined South Sydney. A member of the Rabbitohs' 2014 Premiership winning side, Chris played 116 games for the club before spending 2 years at the Gold Coast, then heading to the West Tigers. Chris became the first FOG to be named Player of the Match in the Challenge Cup final, winning the Lance Todd Trophy, where his side Huddersfield went down to Wigan. Well, Chris McQueen, thanks very much for your time. What does it mean to you to be a FOG?
It's up there with my most proudest achievements. I say all the time when anyone asks about it, as kids, I didn't grow up wanting to play for Australia. Obviously that would have been great, but from as early as I can remember playing rugby league, I wanted to go up to play for Queensland. It was the only thing that I wanted to achieve. It's the sort of thing that dreams are made of.
Well, let's start on the journey to realising that dream of playing for Queensland. Tell us about life growing up, first of all, in Brisbane. So you're one of the rare ones that grew up in Brisbane before moving to the country and then sort of coming back. So tell us about the early days of Chris McQueen in Brisbane.
Yeah, so obviously born in Brisbane, grew up sort of around Eagleby, Beenleigh area. Always loved my sport, did everything. Sort of went to school at Eagleby State. Loved athletics, and then I started playing footy when I was about 10. And for me, growing up, and this might be a bit naive or a bit cocky, but it was never a thought in my head of I hope I make it. It was always I'm going to, but what am I going to do? Am I going to pursue a career in athletics or rugby league? And as I got a little bit older, just learned to love rugby league even more. Moved out to Kingaroy when I was about 13. Played for the Red Ants out there. Played school footy, played a few rep teams here and there, but certainly never made a Queensland team because Wide Bay were no good. We'd go to state carnivals and just get towed up by everyone. So, it was tough, but probably helped build a bit of resilience, I guess. And then, I was in grade 12 and I showed up to class one day and the teacher pulled me out of class and goes, I've got to make a phone call. And I said, oh, okay, this is interesting. And he took me into the office and made a phone call, and he was calling the Wynnum Manly Seagulls because I think he'd had a chat with them and put me on the phone with Mark Rockley, and he said, hey, we're interested in having a chat and getting you down here if you want to come down and play. And so, that was sort of my journey playing for the Red Ants, and then made that move to Brisbane, back to Brisbane, signed with Wynnum Manly, and yeah, sort of got the ball rolling.
They say, yeah. Kingaroy Red Ants have produced a couple of Origin players, which is a feather in the cap for a small country town. Why did the family move to Kingaroy?
My dad moved out there. My parents separated when I was very young, and Dad moved around a bit. He ended up out there. And one year I went out there just for some school holidays and decided that I wanted to stay.
So you came back and played with Wynnum. Was that and you were saying you had to choose between athletics and rugby league in your mind. Was that the pivotal moment, the interest, or had you already made up your mind before that?
Probably already made up my mind, but athletics is a weird one. I didn't even know how to sort of pursue that, but obviously rugby league came knocking on my door, and so I went that way. But yeah, I think I'd made up my mind, but I guess that's the thing that sort of put me over the line.
So a couple of years at Wynnum, then Souths come knocking. Tell us about your transition from being a Wynnum Manly player to heading to Sydney and joining such a famous club.
Randomly showed up to training one day, and Mark Rockley, who's the CEO at Wynnum at the time, called me into his office, and I thought, oh God, what do I do now? But he said, oh, we've got a bit of interest from, and it was actually Manly, and it was Kelly Egan was there. And so I had a bit of a chat with him, and then sort of finished that chat, and then I went out and I trained, and then a few days later at training, Mark Rockley goes, look, just finish the footy season. Don't worry about that sort of stuff. Just go play your footy, and sort of we'll deal with that sort of stuff when it comes time. So I went and I finished the season. It was pretty close to the end of the year. We only had a month or so to go. And then the season ended and he came and he said, oh, well, obviously Manly have showed their interest, but now South Sydney are interested as well. And I thought, oh, all right, cool. But my dad was a Manly fan, always had been. So I thought, oh, that'd be cool to go to Manly, and how happy Dad would be. But so Mark Rockley did sort of the negotiating for me, acted as a manager for me, and sort of went back and forward, and it got to a point where both clubs made the same offer. And he said, and obviously this was in 2008, and obviously Manly went on to win the comp that year. So he said, look, obviously Manly's a great club, but realistically, South are, they're not going that well. So as a player, for you to get a start, you're probably better off going to South. You're probably more likely to get a start at the Rabbitohs. So I would recommend that you go there. So it took a couple of days to think about it and decided that that's where I was going to go. And
turned out all right.
Turned out to be one of the best decisions I ever made. Yep.
And what was it like when you arrived? I mean, to move to Sydney, you've gone from Brisbane to Kingaroy, back to Brisbane, but now you're in Sydney. Now you're in the heartland of Sydney, really, going to Redfern and training for South Sydney. How did you settle in? Was it an easy transition for you?
No, it took a while. So I just got given a phone number, and it was a couple of lads that were, one was in the Roosters 20s and one was in our North Sydney Bears team, and it was they were brothers, and said, they've got a spare room. You can give them a call and move in with them. So that's sort of what I did. And we were living at Bondi Junction. And I think before moving to Sydney, I'd spent 10 days of my life in Sydney. Went for a footy trip, went down for a couple of other weekends. But I felt very lost. Obviously, I was homesick. I was in a new place, new team. But that's I guess that's the good thing about being a rugby league player is sort of day one of work, you're just thrown in with a group of 30 guys and you get to know people pretty quickly. So got to know the boys, and then it was probably only a few months after I got, maybe 3 or 4 months after I got to Sydney, Jamie Simpson was looking for a new place to live, and we got along quite well. And he said, hey, you want to move in with me? And I said, yeah, absolutely. It'd be good to live with actually one of my teammates. And then Dave Tyrrell was living with, I don't know how he found this place, but he was just sort of living with a family as well. And we said, Tiz, do you want to move in with us? And he said, yep, let's go. And so the three of us moved in together. And I think that was probably the real moment where I actually felt like I was sort of at home and really settled in. As I said, probably about 4 months after I moved to Sydney.
And did your footy improve on the back of that?
Yeah, for sure. Obviously, it helped that living with teammates, we could go in together, we could sort of do everything together, and everything felt so much more familiar after that.
When did you start to think that you're a chance of making your NRL debut?
There was a couple of times through the year where I got close. Early in the year, I still was way off. Jason Taylor was the coach, and I remember sitting down with him probably a month or two into the season, and he goes, oh, where do you think you're at? And I said, I'm finally sort of settled in and going okay. And he said, I think you've still got a bit of work to do. And we just sort of just simplified my game. He said, don't worry about trying to overplay or do anything too special. Just go out there and run hard, make your tackles. That's it. So that's all I try to focus on. And then,
because you're an outside back at that stage.
Outside back, yeah. So, growing up as an outside back, you watch the guys like Benji and those guys that are silky on their feet, and you want to emulate that. So I was probably trying to be too fancy and too good on my feet, and it wasn't working for me. So I was probably my strength was probably more just be a bit more physical. Just run hard. Pick a space or pick a person and just run hard. And so that's what I started trying to do, and I think that helped my game. And then there was a game, probably 3 quarters through the year, where there were 2 people in doubt for the game, and this was my first time getting the invite to captain's run. And if either of these 2 players didn't play, I was going to play. And I thought, surely one of them's not going to play, and so this will be it. And didn't eventuate. Both those players passed their fitness test, and they both played. And then it was probably maybe a month or so later, sort of back end, round 22, I think it was,
Against Manly,
against
the team
Manly.
that you would have liked to have played for your father.
Yeah.
The irony of that as well, making your debut in which you scored a try.
Yeah, yep. So, and it's funny, I was living with Jamie Simpson, as I said, and he was the one that week. Jamie Simpson's in doubt. If he doesn't play, you're going to play. And so I remember at home joking, I'm going to kick you down the stairs, or I'm going to poison your food or whatever. But I think he knew earlier in the week that he wasn't going to play, and he didn't say anything to me. And it wasn't until captain's run, I showed up for captain's run that week. And yeah, Jason Taylor said, Simo's not playing, you're in.
Round 22, the end of that first season, you get a taste. What was the off-season like, knowing that you're now an NRL player? Was that one of the biggest off-seasons potentially of your career that you had a taste of playing?
You know what? I was unfortunate enough we played Sharks around 26, and of course I was playing on the wing, so with about 10 minutes to go, I'm on the wing, there's a bit of space. John Sutton throws about a 20-metre cutout ball, and I score in the corner, but their defending winger came and sort of attempting to make a tackle, fell on my legs, and I did my ACL. So my off-season between 2009, 2010 was just rehab, working hard, rehab. So it was probably the opposite. I thought I've worked so hard to get here, and now I'm injured, and you know, what's that going to do? Like, I'm on the back foot now. I'm not going to have the preseason that I want to have. And then we played a trial. I didn't play because I was obviously still coming through my rehab, but we played a trial in Coffs Harbour. And the day of that trial, it was our last trial in 2010, I went and saw our doctor. He was, obviously our team doctor was there, and he had a look at my knee and he said, yeah, look, you've ticked every box along the way. There's no reason why you won't be fit and ready to go for round one. Played the trial, got back to Sydney. That maybe Tuesday or Wednesday at training, I re-ruptured my ACL. So I missed the whole 2010 season. I was off contract, didn't know what was going to happen. And then round one, of course, we played the Roosters, big game. So Russell Crowe was there, and he actually grabbed me in the change room and said, look, this sucks, but you've showed some good signs and we're not going to let you go out like that. I'm going to make sure that we keep you on board. So not too long after that, the club offered me another contract, another 1 year. So again, got the opportunity to go through all my rehab, the whole 2010 year, but then that put me in a position where at the end of 2010, I was fully fit and ready to go. So I did have a full preseason. Round one, 2011, I didn't get picked for first grade. North Sydney Bears had a bye, so I didn't play. I think we got a couple of injuries and maybe a suspension. So round two, you're back in, got picked on the bench, and that was it. Played every other game, every game for the rest of the year. So yeah, it's...
Mentally, how important, looking back on it, was Russell Crowe grabbing you and telling you, mate, you still have a future here? From a mental perspective, looking back, how important was that?
That's massive. When that happened, I remember being at home, and I remember just sitting at home in tears, just thinking, like, is this going to be it? I played 4 games at the end of 2009, and I was devastated. Like, I thought that may be it. Like, is this club going to think that I'm injury prone? Because I'd never been injured prior to that, and since then had very few injuries. Like, knock on wood, I've been one of the lucky ones. But yeah, I was, you don't know what to think, but it all happened very quickly that I got injured, got booked in for the surgery, had that chat with Russell Crowe. And so, yeah, very quickly it, I guess, put me at ease and gave me some clarity and understanding that I was going to get another chance.
And of course, from there, you go on to play Origin and win a premiership. So you know what it's like to be in that situation where you're fearing for your career, and you also know the highs of the game. When did you realise or start, getting some indication or thoughts that you might be able to play for Queensland?
In 2012, started the year on the wing, and I think played the first 2 or 3 games on the wing, and then Michael Maguire grabbed me and said, we've got some boys that are specialist wingers. You're a bigger body. I think I could move you and play you back row. Just thought, oh yeah, all right, we'll give this a go. And I was in and out of first grade, I reckon, for about 10 weeks. And I got sort of frustrated because I actually thought that year, I think, I can't remember the specifics, but I remember there was some question marks about who's going to play in the outside backs for Queensland, like what's going to happen. Obviously, Darius Boyd's got one of those spots locked up, and GI, but I think there's some question marks about some other players. And I thought, and I even said to Michael Maguire, like, there was a game, a specific game I remember. We were playing the Bulldogs at ANZ, and I was the 18th man, and Eddie Pettybourne got hurt in the warm-up. And so I come into the team, and I sat on the bench for the whole game, and I didn't get on the field. And I remember just the frustration. I said to Michael Maguire, like, I feel like I could be doing something for the team. Like, I could be playing on the wing and be getting a job done. And I feel like if I got the opportunity to play wing that whole year, if the team was going well and if I was going well, there might have been an opportunity there in the Queensland team. And he just said, look, I want you to stick it out at back row. I'm not going to put you back on the wing. I want you to play back row. So I think that was a Friday night. The next day we had a game, and because I didn't get on the field, I was eligible to still play. So go tomorrow and play reserve grade for the Bears. And we had a good win. The NRL team lost narrowly to the Bulldogs. And Maguire grabbed me and said, we have a bye next week. First grade has a bye next week, but you'll be back in the team the following week. And then that was it. Played every game for the rest of that year. Started to play decent footy. Started 2013. Had a good start, and it helps when I've got, John Sutton is my half and GI's out the back. I made a career out of running lead lines and someone playing out the back and GI making breaks. And when you've got that guy playing as good as he was, makes my job easy, and it obviously makes me look good. So.
Well, you're being a little bit modest there, but I understand that. So 2013 is when you made your debut.
Yep. And
Queensland have won 7 series in a row. You come into that side. Tell us about the phone call or finding out you were playing for Queensland, and B, what it was like walking into camp for the first time with a team that had won 7 Origin series in a row.
It's a funny story how I found out. We played the Sharks on Monday night. So at the time, the Queensland team was announced at Monday Night Footy, was announced at halftime of that game. So there was sort of a bit of chat about who's going to be in and whatever in the media and that sort of stuff. And I was obviously really hopeful. The club already knew. They didn't tell me, and I figured that'd be the way. They're not gonna tell us until after the game. So just try to focus on that game. So we play the first half, and we get in the change room, and the Queensland team's announced. And obviously, Maguire's doing his halftime chat, and I look around, and I see Andrew Everingham. He's not playing that week, and he just gives me one of these. And I knew so that's how I found out. One of the boys told me at halftime of that Sharks game. So we went back out, played the rest of that game, and then we come back in, and we lost that game. So Maguire's given his sort of ripped into the boys a bit. Then he goes, "All right, boys, now some good news. Inglis, Teo, McQueen, pick for Queensland." So that was the moment that I found out. Halftime of that game from one of the boys. And then because we played Monday Night Football, we travelled up the next morning. Everyone else was already in camp. So when we arrived at camp, the whole team were out doing some promotional stuff. So that probably helped actually. When I showed up to camp, the whole team wasn't there, and it was just me and my South teammates. So it gave me an opportunity to sort of meet some of the staff, get checked into my room, get a feel for the place, and then it was sort of later that arvo when the rest of the boys got back that I actually started to get around the boys and meet the team.
And then it hit you that you're playing for Queensland in Origin.
Yep.
What was the emotion? Was it one of like, oh God, am I up to this? Or like, can I do it? Sort of what was going through your mind? And when did you settle down, I suppose?
I was never worried about like, can I do this or am I good enough? Like I was confident enough. The fear was more, what if I do mess it up? I knew that if I showed up and played my best footy, that I'll be fine. But obviously there's always that fear, like especially when it's 7 in a row. What if I'm part of the team to lose? But my first game I was picked on the bench, so that took a little bit of pressure off. I'm not going to be out there for that first kickoff. I didn't even know how many minutes I'd play, and I didn't get on until sort of midway through the second half. That coming off the bench helped calm my nerves a lot. We lost that first game. Played in Sydney and we lost. So the second game was probably the one that scared me more. After that first game, we made a few changes, and I got promoted to the starting side. We played in Brisbane, and to me, that was the game that probably made me more nervous. Playing at Suncorp, starting, we have to win this game. So I was probably more nervous. But that first, I reckon, 30 minutes of the game, we blew them away. We started really fast, and by halftime, I wouldn't say the game was over, but we were well and truly in control of that game. And so it was a pretty comfortable win. And then game 3 back in Sydney, so we knew that we were going to be up against it. That's the game with the streaker where he ran on the field. So I think that game was 12-10, I think. So that was a close game. I played the whole game, and that was, but just didn't have time to feel anything. It just goes like that. And even we're leading the game and it's getting close to the end, but you just don't have a chance to sort of think about too much. You just got to go. You got to just keep on going. And then with about a minute to go, we turned the ball over close to New South Wales line just after that streak had been on the field. And then they sort of go for an all or nothing play, a little chip over the top, and the ball goes over the sideline with a minute to go. And that's when the shoulders drop and you just know the game's over and job's done.
So growing up as a young boy and, as you mentioned earlier, just wanting to play for Queensland, what was it like when you were presented with that maroon jersey for the first time? Yeah,
it was just unbelievable. There's no words. I don't even know how to describe it, but yeah, it's something that I've dreamt about and thought about forever. And it's probably one of those things that even if you think you're good enough or you're confident, it's like winning the lotto. It's not going to happen for me. I'd love that, and we all want that, but it's not going to happen for me. And then it actually did, and it's still something I've got my jersey hanging up in my house, and it's still something that just gives me so much pride to look at that. And when people ask me about it, obviously I've been very lucky to achieve some special things in my career, but that's right up there with them all.
Added to that, you look around that dressing room or when you're on the field at the players that you were playing with, half of that team could potentially end up as future immortals.
Yes.
When did that sink in when you looked around? You're used to playing with Greg Inglis at South Sydney, you mentioned Ben Teo, but then you look at the other players that you're playing with. Have you reflected on that at all?
I still do, all the time. Like, people ask me about my origin stuff, and that's one of the things that I love to talk about. Is my edge was me, Thurston, Inglis, Boyd. We've got Billy Slater at the back. We've got Cooper Cronk running the show on the other side, getting the ball from Cameron Smith. Like, look at that team. There's some guys that'll go down as the greatest players of all time, and I got to be in that team with them. That's something that I still talk about and still just have so much pride in.
Did it make you a better player?
Yeah, absolutely. Yep. It just you can't play with guys like that and not be better. And I guess the main thing at any level of rugby league is that everyone else is going to get their job done. That all the passes are going to be crisp. Everyone's going to run the right lines. Everyone's going to show up when they need to. And so it just simplifies things, which is probably the opposite of what you think. You think it'd be harder. You've got to do more, but at origin level, you've got to do more. Go out there and be better. But you don't. If anything, it simplifies things because you know that everyone else is getting their job done. Everyone else is sort of elite level, so it just makes my job easy.
You're still a young man, but 2013 and 2014, arguably the two best years of your life. Your debut for Queensland, playing all 3 matches of the 8th consecutive Origin Series win. And then in 2014, you managed to play again, but you're also part of a South Sydney team that wins a premiership for one of the most famous sporting clubs not only in the country but around the world, particularly in rugby league. Were you aware when you signed with South the enormity of the club and the passion the fans have for it, and how long it had been since they'd won a premiership?
No, I had no idea. Something that I learnt pretty quickly. But yeah, I had no idea. I was just a kid that just wanted to play in the NRL. That was it. But yeah, those early years at South, we did struggle, obviously. It wasn't until Michael Maguire took over that we started to show something, I guess. And to be honest, I still feel like 2012 and 13, we probably missed a couple of opportunities there. But yeah, 2014, it all came together. And some of my favourite moments of my career, when I watch the sort of tape back or watch highlights on YouTube, is not the actual game itself, it's the crowd, it's watching the crowd. There's obviously the really famous one, the round 19, 2012, the Roosters game. I love when we make that break up the sideline, watching the crowd and seeing the passion from the fans. And then obviously end of 2014, we play in the Grand Final. And I think everyone that wasn't a Bulldogs fan was probably going for South Sydney that night. And you can see it in the crowd, and you can see after Adam Reynolds scores his try and the boys run towards the crowd. Yeah, that you know, it's obviously it's a special club, but it's just made so much more special by the fans and the people that love the club.
Well, during that 2014, you played the first 2 matches of the Origin series, but then you suffered that ankle injury. Did you, obviously disappointed missing out on Game 3, no question about that, but did you have a sense that South was building and this bloody ankle might ruin a big year?
Yeah. As I said, we had a couple of big years in 2012 and 13. We made the semis and then lost both of those games. But 2014, again, we were going really well. Then I got injured, and I went in and got the scan, and they sort of had a bit of a look at it, and they weren't really sure if I needed the surgery or not. And so I had to go in and see the specialist. If I had the surgery, that would have ended my season. And he said, look, I think you could probably just rehab it and see how it goes. And then in a month's time, we can sort of see if it's come good or if it's not. And then, you know, there's no harm in trying, because the season was going to be over regardless. So I took that option, and thankfully it came good. And I ended up missing about 5 weeks. And then, yeah, got back on the field and finished the year. And, yeah, obviously had the year that we did.
So after that, a couple of years, and you finish at South Sydney, Gold Coast, and then the West Tigers, which was I suppose, fair to say, difficult end to your NRL career. You then head over to England. What was that like?
Yeah, it was interesting. That happened very quickly. Showed up at Tigers, our season was nearly over. We'd had a disappointing year, and I was off contract, and Madge was the coach there, and he said, "Oh, any interest in going overseas?" And I said, "Yeah." Obviously, at that point, like you said, I had a tough time at the Tigers, and I was probably aware that it was going to be tough to find another contract in the NRL. So I said, "Yeah, I'd go overseas." Simon Wolford was the coach at Huddersfield when I went there, and I think from my first phone call and first chat with Huddersfield and with the CEO over there to me being on the plane was only a couple of weeks. I was waiting for a passport. My dad's English, obviously. So I was going through the process of getting my English passport. And when I spoke to the CEO, he said, we know a few people. We might be able to sort of pull some strings and get that sorted out, get that fast-tracked. And it was only a couple of days later, the passport came through. And he wanted me on the plane the next day. And I said, look, just give me a week or so to sort out what I've got to sort out here, say goodbye to the boys, get my life sorted out a little bit. So it was like the first week of September I went over there, and that was back end of COVID. So their COVID break was longer than ours. So I think our season at Tigers was just about to end, or it just ended. But by the time I got to England, there was still 10 games to go. So I went over there initially just on a contract for the rest of that year, just to sort of see how I went. And yeah, from there I signed, I think, a 2-year contract extension, and then another 1 year. So I ended up doing 3.5 years over there. Mixed bag, I guess, in terms of success. We made a Challenge Cup final in 2022, and then we made the finals that year, but lost week 1 of the finals. Other than that, didn't have a lot of success on the field over there, but I enjoyed my time over there, and it's an interesting place.
Well, the reason I bring it up is because here in Australia, we know the Challenge Cup final, I suppose, more than really the Super League. So to play in a Challenge Cup final at Wembley, despite being beaten by Wigan, you were still awarded the man of the match, which is the Lance Todd Trophy. A number of Australians, including Brett Kenny and Graham Eadie, have won a Lance Todd Trophy. But you're the first FOG to be named man of the match in a Challenge Cup final. That must give you a great thrill as well.
Yeah, absolutely. We didn't actually get to play at Wembley because, and this is purely coincidental, Huddersfield has a football team, a soccer team, and they'd had a good year, and they made the final. I don't follow football, so I don't know a whole lot about it, but they made the final, and they were playing in London, and I think they played at Wembley that same weekend as the Challenge Cup final. And if they'd have won that, they would have got promoted to the Premier League. They didn't win, but yeah. So we got moved to Tottenham Hotspur Stadium, which is a brand new $1 billion stadium. You know, it's got I don't know if you've seen. There's a clip where they lift the grass up and take the grass away. There's an NFL field that comes up and sits in place. The change rooms were massive and absolutely immaculate. But yeah, so we played there. We were winning with about 3 or 4 minutes to go. Wigan scored in the corner, but yeah, we had a good game and I played well. I knew as sort of one of the senior boys that if we were any chance, we would have been. No one was giving us a chance. We were playing Wigan, who have since, they won the Challenge Cup, the minor premiership and the premiership last year. Like, they're flying at the moment, so no one gave us a chance. But yeah, so I knew that as one of the most experienced players and as one of our leaders there, that I had to stand up and play a good game of footy if we were going to be any chance. And I did that, and yeah, was lucky enough to get the man of the match, which I didn't know a whole lot about, but it's actually, I've learned since then that it's a really prestigious thing and it's a really big deal. So they present the award immediately after the game, but then they take the trophy back, and then I think it's like the Tuesday night after the game, there's a event, like a formal event, sit down dinner, and they have guest speakers. They invite all past winners, and then they get you up on stage and present you with the award again. So yeah, I was lucky enough to go to that in 2022, and then in 2023, I got invited. Of course, I got invited to go back, but as the former winner, I got to present that to Lachie Lamb, who kicked the field goal to win the game for them in 2023. So yeah, it's a pretty special thing, and to be the only FOG to ever do it, yeah, that's cool.
Who's had the biggest influence on your career?
Probably in terms of coaching, I would say Michael Maguire. He was the one that moved me from being an outside back to being a back rower. That first pre-season at South, the other ones were harder, but that first pre-season at South taught me how to be a professional. Prior to that, I was, still obviously quite young, but I was still that guy that would go off on an off season and sit around for 5 weeks and then, train for a week or two and come back and off we go. And he was probably the guy that made me realize that's just not going to cut it. There's basically, you hear people say all the time, no days off. Well, that's kind of how it is in rugby league. You might take a week or two off at the start of your pre-season, but then everyone's training, everyone's staying fit. And yeah, he was, I guess, the guy that taught me to do that.
What do you reckon a young bloke at Eagleby or 13-year-old heading out to Kingaroy to play with the Red Ants would think, looking now at a man that has won a premiership with one of the great NRL clubs, played 5 Origin matches, played a test for England, won a Lance Todd Trophy as the player of the match in one of the biggest games on the English Rugby League calendar. What do you reckon that young bloke could be thinking if someone told him that lies ahead of you, Chris McQueen?
Yeah, I don't think he'd believe it. As I said, I was always quite confident in my ability to make it as a rugby league player, but even when I signed my first contract at South, all I would say is I just want to play one game. If I can just get one game, I just want to be able to say that I'm an NRL player. I did it. So yeah, if I could sort of see myself now as a 12 or 13-year-old, there's just no way. It just seems too good to be true.
And what advice would you give 12 or 13-year-olds that might have the same dreams?
Just believe in yourself, trust the process, work at it. But you know, like everyone that sort of makes it and ends up where I am, you're going to have people that are going to tell you that you can't make it, you're not good enough, whatever reason, whether they don't like you or they don't want you to achieve something. But it's all up to you. You've got to obviously make the right decisions and work hard, but anything's possible.
Chris McQueen, congratulations on a wonderful career and thanks for your time.
Thank you very much.
Thanks for watching this episode of the FOGS Queenslander podcast. If there's a FOG you want to hear from, leave a comment to let us know. And don't forget to like and subscribe so you don't miss any of our videos.